Welcome to another episode of Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Dave, let's get started. Well, it's just been such a terrible, month. Just everything that's happened with these shootings, and our hearts go out to them. What happened in Buffalo and in Texas. But I think, in Buffalo specifically, I just see these. The liberals are trying to claim that conservatives are trying to excuse the Buffalo grocery store shooting spree, but the truth of the matter is that it's conservatives who support the death penalty, including the death penalty for white supremacists like this individual. I don't even want to say this individual's name. The truth is that liberals like Joe Biden, they halted federal executions. And it was President Trump who, when he restarted federal executions after almost 20 years, and the first person that was killed by the federal government under President Trump was a white supremacist. So the fact that you have this evil Buffalo shooter who, under New York law, which is, there's a veto proof majority in New York, which will not hold the shooter accountable to the ultimate price. I think he's a potential danger. He could cause a race riot in prison. So why don't we have this conversation to say, let's hold this person accountable and let's do it to the maximum extent that would be allowable?
Well, first of all, I don't see the difference, but when you say hold someone accountable, life without the possibility of parole versus the death penalty is certainly they're both holding someone accountable. And I would just speak from my own view. If I were someone who committed a crime, take the Boston Marathon bomber, for example. They sent him to the maximum security place in Colorado, where you're in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, and you get 1 hour a day to go out. I would rather be dead than have to have that for the rest of my life. So first of all, I don't think you're not holding people accountable when you have the death penalty. Secondly, the death
Well,
penalty,
can I respond to that first though? Because this Buffalo shooter himself, in his vile little manifesto, he actually said that he wants life in prison because he wants to bleed the state. He wants to take as much resources as he can. So I think it's disgusting. He's taken all these lives, and now he wants to take taxpayer money because he thinks the system is, helping minorities too much. And so
well,
we're giving him what he wants.
well, again, that argument doesn't wash either because it costs 2 to 3 times as much to keep someone alive on death row as it does in regular prison. So I was going to say, my views over 40 years have been incredibly consistent. The only thing I've changed my view on actually is the death penalty. I used to be for it, now I'm against it for three main reasons. First of all, as I said, it's incredibly cost inefficient. It costs states much more to keep people alive on death row than it does in normal cells. Secondly, it's not a deterrent. Okay, most crimes are crimes of passion, and people don't pause and say, oh, gee, if I get life without parole or if I get put to death, let me decide whether I'm going to shoot someone. And third, and perhaps most importantly, it's so racially unjust. You look at a lot of people of color who are put to death wrongly. And if you have one person who's put to death wrongly, that's one too many. And you look at the countries that have the death penalty, they're not modern democracies. There are places like Saudi Arabia and Iran and countries like that. And also, I have to say, Carrie, you cannot be pro-life and pro-death penalty. A life is a life. You cannot choose, okay? In your definition of a life may be one thing, someone else's definition of a life may be another. So I think it's very inconsistent for a lot of people who say, oh, a life is a life, and then they support the death penalty. So I think it's also another example of just how barbaric this country is, and it hasn't done anything. And by the way, I'll give you a classic example. Nebraska, you talked about Trump reinstating the death penalty. In Nebraska, they had a thing where voters wanted to get rid of it, and then the legislature brought it back. Then they got rid of it again, and then they brought it back again. It doesn't matter. No one in Nebraska has been put to death since 2006. So it's not as if this is a system that is working. So I think the death penalty is wrong on all fronts, and it's hypocritical for people who are pro-life to say that they support it. And I'll give you the last.
I disagree well, not surprisingly, I disagree with you on this as far as I am pro innocent life. And I can't think of a more stark difference between the life of an innocent preborn infant and the life of a murderous white supremacist who shot a bunch of Black people because they were Black. So to me, I don't even think they're apples and oranges. They're not the same equation as far as holding someone accountable. And in this case, this would be, in my view, a case of racial justice to stop this odious ideology and to give a signal that this is not allowed. And yes, I agree with you that it should be applied only very, very rarely and only in the most airtight cases. This guy confessed to it. He wrote, a 180-page manifesto outlining his crime. There is zero question about whether he committed it. He's confessed it.
He live
streamed
streamed it.
So
for crying out loud.
Right, exactly. So this is not a question of like a mistaken identity or did he do it or not. So in this case, and I agree, it should be in only the most extreme cases. And I think this.
But
is
that's
an
your
extreme case.
definition. There are other people that might have a definition of what life is. You can't just, it's black and white. Either a life is a life or a life is not a life. You can't pick and choose, which is what people like you who are pro-choice, who are pro-life, and then support the death penalty do. So I guess we'll just have to
We're going to have
agree
to agree to
on that one.
disagree.